Thank you, Shashankji, for your insightful address. Now I would like to open the panel for a discussion. So I request Shashankji to kindly start the panel discussion. And if participants, there would be a question and answer round also after this, so you can address your questions to the panelists.
I now call upon Mr. Ayush from Himachal Pradesh National Law University to felicitate Ms. Jyotika Kalra with a plaque. I now call upon Mr. Nirmal Sharma, convener of Think India, and from the Law Department of Punjab to felicitate Srimati Pragna Parande. As stated earlier, the theme for this panel's discussion is She in the Constitution, and our first speaker of the day shall be Dr. Pinky Anand. I shall be giving a brief introduction about her. Dr. Pinky Anand is a senior advocate at the Supreme Court and holds the office as an additional Solicitor General of India, and in doing so is only the second woman to have been appointed to this office of high stature. Dr. Anand graduated from the Lady Shri Ram College for Women and received her LLB degree from the Faculty of Law, Delhi University, during which time she also was elected as the first female secretary of the Delhi University Student Union. A doctorate in law, a Harvard Law School graduate on an NLEG scholarship, Dr. Anand is revered as an expert in the fields of constitutional law, property law, private international law, family law, environment law. She is the Vice President of the Bar Association of India, the Country Councillor for Law Asia, and a governing body member of the Indian Council of Arbitration. She also headed the All India legal team of the BJP for several years. A leading lawyer in diverse fields and a versatile and multifaceted person, her accomplishments extend from far and beyond those in the legal realm and other social activities. Dr. Anand has worked tirelessly for the cause of the rule of law and social development and has achieved numerous accolades and milestones in her endeavor towards the development of the country, the right of free speech, the protection of child rights, and eradication of societal ills and malpractices. The causes espoused by her have led towards landmark changes in the legal fabric. I now invite upon her.
We have a Sunday afternoon, and we are sitting here on a platform of Think India and taking the steps forward in this great historic journey that we are talking about. While we were sitting, Jyoti, Pragya and myself, waiting for joining you people in the panel, the discussion was whether indeed we would have an academic discourse on what the Constitution is, because the subject is She in the Constitution, or would we deal in a broader way with the subject in hand, which of course is the importance of gender equality, gender empowerment, the presence, the leap forward, the glass ceiling, and similar concepts that have come across. My view was that all of you are thinkers. Think India aside, you're also thinkers. And thinkers don't need to be educated. We don't want to go through the various articles of the Constitution. Most of you would probably know them, not that I will not mention them, but the idea is not to run this academic discourse in this fashion, to have a lecture of what the Constitution entails in terms of women or the importance of women or development. But let me just go back. The idea is to give some thoughts. The idea is just to share with you one's own experiences, even though sometimes when I think about my experience from 40 years, when I graduated out of Campus Law Center and became a lawyer, I keep thinking, I said, what was there? What happened? Did you just take the step forward? Did you just take the leap forward? I don't know how it happened. if you ask me. But if I look back, I do think that some of the very critical features that entail one to step and take a leap forward is perseverance, determination, belief in yourself, belief in the world, the extreme diligence that is required to take the leap forward, to realize that you are part of a movement where you don't think back, and more importantly, to think that you are actually able to do everything. That's the best way I can think of any kind of equality concept. It's not that you're better or not you're worse. It's not feminism. It's not feminist. I'm not even sure what those words mean. They're pretty abstract in their own sense. But I do believe that I can do what I can do, and you can do what you can do. And if the twain should meet, very well. So on that front, I'll take this dialogue forward. Go back to India. India has gone through various stages of development on this front. So you've had the Vedic period. Now the Vedic period was extremely beneficial, progressive for the interest of women. So women were revered, women had their positions, women were able to choose their life partners, women were able to have education, women were revered in every possible manner whatsoever. The post-Vedic period, you had a downfall. You had the Alexander and you had the Huns, and you had a downfall in this entire progression system. Then you came to the medieval period. The medieval period was even worse, and you started having development of concepts like Parda systems, and basically denying women equality. And of course, we don't need to look at India alone. This happens, even Aristotle, even Confucius. If you look at the various thinkers, the idea was to deny women citizenship rights, statehood rights. So women couldn't be part of the whole. That was a broad consensus across the world, and some say it is due to politics because men wanted to assume the power unto themselves, and there are other theories. But be that as it may, this was the belief that pervaded the entire system globally. And India was definitely also part of it, excepting for the Vedic period when, whether it's Rig Veda, whether it's Upanishads, there was an entire upward trend as far as women are concerned. So medieval period was again one of the worst, as I said. It improved in British times. British actually tried, worked hard, including on Child Marriage Restraint Act and other features of laws to improve the lot of women, and there were active issues on this front. So we come from there to the current point of time. And I think if we look at the other constitutions in the world, we look at the world in general, you will find that the Indian constitution has been equal right from the word go. So you've had equal status for women. You've had, in fact, a provision for preferential women, treatment for women under Article 15(3). Equality, of course, is the first hallmark of any rule of law society and democracy, which India is. So we've headed pretty strongly in that direction of trying to take the constitution virtues, if I may say so, forward in this entire analysis. And we've had various provisions of directive principles, Article 39, Article 41, each of these which covers progressive action towards women in all senses, whether it is maternity, whether it is labor, whether it is wages, whether it is employment, whether it is in fact treating women as equals. But I will say that I think in India, the legal regime, and of course at the helm of legal regime is the constitution, has done extremely progressively well for the lot of women. And I think it's resulted in advancements much easier, much speedier, much quicker than other systems would have prevailed. And the reason is very simple. The reason is when a society transforms itself, you have a certain notion. As we mentioned, there's been gender inequality broadly in the Indian context, except for some periods. So how do you change a system? You can only change a system if the people want to change it, if society is ready to change it, or you compel a change. How do you compel a change? You compel it possibly. One of the major weapons, if I may say so, one of the major tools is law. And that is, I think, what India has worked very strongly towards, to use law and the legal regime and the rule of law as a weapon to transform society, which effectively it has. But then again, we have a paradox. In India, as much as anywhere else also, it is not exactly a simple formula. You take various parameters. You take the criteria of percentage of women in education. You take the percentage of women as voters. You take the percentage of women as ministers. You take the percentage of women as lawyers. You take the percentage of women in a lot of fields, and you'll find that there is a constant paradox. It's not a resolved paradox. However, the step forward So you have two fronts of steps forward in the constitution and the legal regime. You have one by legislation. So you've had laws made, and in fact, I might say at some stages that sometimes you're overstepping making laws towards, in the name of women. But having said that, that's only a offside. The main front does remain that you are forming laws constantly in an effort to improve the lot of women, and there have been broadly three stages of this evolution. I'll come to that in a moment. And the second front is judicial review. So by judicial precedent, by judicial judgments, you've had a changeover in law to result into a formal change either into the law itself as a matter of legislation or in society. So this is really the entire nexus between society and law and the constitution which has been working. So we've had, now talking about the various eras, if I may say so. So approximately up to 1980s and thereafter, I'll come straight away there. Constitution envisaged equality, we've already said that. You had development of laws, whether by legislation or by judicial precedent also. In fact, by and large, hand in hand and hand in glove, I might say so. You've had laws made which dealt with physical violence against women as a primary aspect. I'm just mentioning the same. You've had domestic violence laws, which came later by domestic violence civil law, but you came 498A, 304B, which basically 498, as we all know, is cruelty against women, whether on account of dowry or otherwise. 304B is dowry deaths, because there was such prevalence of these kind of ill practices that it needed to be dealt with. And the only way it was felt that it could be dealt with is not by covering it in the existing laws, but in fact to have a specific law to deal with women-related crimes so that A, there would be a focus on the issue. And I think that's very important. It's not only important to have a law in place. You need to ensure that society gets a message through. The message can be got by various ways, and one of the ways is definitely by creating a classification. And this is a very academic dispute. Should you do under the existing laws? Why do you need 304B, dowry death? Murder is murder. 302 is already there. You could have included it. But by making it into a separate offense, the idea was to focus the attention of society onto these aspects. And that is why primarily the focus was on physical violence, because that was the first level of development that one needed to deal with, in particular in the Indian context, where you had evils such as dowry, you had patriarchy of sorts, which subjugates women. So you take the step forward. Post that period, somewhere down the 90s, you started having development of laws, and in fact it went on for about 2 decades, on civil rights. So you had questions of Succession Act, and you had the amendment in 2005, for example, of the Succession Act, which resulted in change as far as women are concerned, and women could get co-parcenary rights, be a co-parcener in an HUF, which hitherto they were denied. I'm sure all of you know what that means, but that basically means that the usual traditional Hindu undivided family, where only males were either the kartas, that is the managers of the HUF, or the co-partners, that is the members of the HUF. So you had focus on giving women equal rights in that HUF properties, which hitherto they did not have, and they only had a right of literally residence or to be maintained out of Hindu undivided family, and I think that changes. To my mind, economic independence is a very important criteria for purposes of development, and there is no way that you can actually achieve development unless you have that economic focus within you. And I'll just mention to you, when we are talking about this on the constitutional and the legal front, some personal experiences here. And that would probably indicate what I am trying to say. Now, there was a time when my daughter was playing a tournament in Patiala, and she fell sick, and I decided that I needed to go there to take care of her. There was no flight, so there was a train. I didn't have any reservations or booking. So in any case, somebody's got something on. This is the ills of modern technology. So to go back, I decided to go to Patiala, and my daughter's friend was also there, and she was also not too well. So I asked her mother, I said, would you like to come? And she said, are you planning to go? Have you made your reservations? I said, no, I don't have time. I'm leaving tomorrow morning. It's at 6 o'clock, and I know there are no tickets available. I checked up. So I'll go to the platform, and we'll decide, see what is possible there. She says, but then what about the family? I said, yeah, I'll tell the family that I'm going to see my daughter. She's not well. My husband, my in-laws, etc. And she said, but don't you need to think about this? I said, no, I don't need to think about it. I have to go, I'm going. And actually, I thought back later, I don't blame her. She was a housewife, And I was an independent, so to say, professional, whatever. And I just didn't have even a doubt in my mind as to what I was doing, and I actually went, took care of the whole basketball team, and came back the same night, or the next morning. And that is the kind of scenario that you are talking about. Independence means true independence. And true independence requires rights, obligations, performance, belief, and this thought in your mind that you can do it all, which is one of the frameworks that I had mentioned in the first instance to you, whether it's being, going into Delhi University Students' Union as a women's secretary. And I must tell you a very interesting thing on this part. DUSU was an experience. Incidentally, if any of you have not participated in public life or in unions, please do so. It's an exhilarating experience. It's a frightening experience. It's an experience which takes you every way of the step forward, because I think the confidence that it generates in you, the equality concept that it generates in you in being with people in different environments. It is not only study alone, it is not work, it is whether you sit in an evening over a cup of tea or coffee in the United Coffee House, or you deal with students or interests. And I think this stretches across, as far as I'm concerned, I think my public life experience has been a great booner for me. And I have learned every possible thing within this framework. And I also go back to my time and say, thank God I was from Old Delhi. I actually grew up playing kanchas on the road. And I could do, pittu and whatever else and all those games that it took. And I think that takes you a long way, because you think you are there in a sense sharing with everything. So just coming back on the Constitution and the legal framework, you had the development of these succession rights and property rights, maintenance rights, and then you had another transition way forward. And that is somewhere where we are even at the present point of time. And that is to do with political empowerment, for example. And that was a very important change in Indian society, because the representation of women had been so abysmal that it needed to be rectified. Now, once upon a time, I used to believe that quotas are something which is something not acceptable. Why should I go for a quota? I have merit. I should be able to make it on my merit. But somewhere down the line, again, there's this time factor. You don't have the time to wait. So what do? So you needed to have, and you did have, you had 73rd and 74th Amendment, which created quotas for women in Panchayati Raj institutions. And today we have approximately 46% of women as elected representatives in the Panchayati Raj institutions. And I think, again, the same question is there, staying on the surface for the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. The 33% reservation bill is yet another tool which is being thought about. So this is broadly how we have managed to evolve ourselves. And I can go on forever, because there has been so much law development, but just let me mention to you some of the key marks and leave it there. You've had, I think, in the historic part of women's laws, I can think of maybe 3 judgments which would be very significant. And the first would be the Mathura rape case, where it actually, India, unfortunately, there is a high rate of incidence of rape, and that needs to be tackled. So you had basically Mathura rape case, which brought out that you would be able to rely upon the testimony of the victim, that is the woman victim. You had, thereafter, you had the judgment of Geeta Hariharan. I'm sure Pragya will talk about it also. But Geeta Hariharan, which talked about women having equal rights of guardianship. And in fact, the National Commission for Women is in the process of recommending changes in the statute itself. But it actually took Geeta Hariharan, and in fact, the co-petitioner was Vandana Shiva, in the context of guardianship of women, women being guardians, that this entire concept came to run. That's right. Mother, you're right. So this is where maybe Geeta Hariharan struck a chord. Then you've had several judgments on violence, etc. But again, coming back to what came around in 1993, Vishakha judgment, which dealt with sexual harassment against women in workplace. And I think, again, that is a very important aspect, because you can't work unless you have the environment to work. So one is opportunity, one is education, one is access, and one is definitely the environment within which you can actually give the best to society and to work as a true professional, or as a true individual, or as a true businesswoman, as a true woman. Let's leave it at that. And that is where Vishakha's judgment came in, which filled in fact, the lacunas in the laws, and said, we'll rely upon the CEDAW conventions, we'll rely upon the other international conventions, the Beijing principles, and incorporate this till legislation comes. And law came. Vishakha guidelines set out the entire principles on how this situation should be dealt with. Subsequently, it has been translated into a law, and now we have, of course, laws into place, committees into place, looking into each of these aspects. But I will not leave it at that. The last step forward on this, Sabrimala judgment. I think is something which came out in the forefront. And the issue was really of human dignity, human rights, women's dignity, women's right of choice. And that is where, in fact, the judgment singled out this factor and held the way forward as much as other judgments did. But just on the last circumference, we have come a long way, as I said. Today, in fact, you wouldn't be surprised, in 2019, the number of women voters were equal to men voters. This has never happened in the history of India. But I think the 2019 elections, the 17th Lok Sabha, really showed the way forward, but the paradox which I was talking about. You have only 10% women who are candidates and who were successful. So that is where the paradoxical system comes. In law, let me talk about law for 2 minutes. Today we are standing here before you, we've got the positions that we have, we are working for the country. But you had a time where you had a woman called Regina Guha. She was from Calcutta, and she made an application for being registered as a lawyer in 1916. She was denied, and on what ground? It's actually preposterous. That she is not a person. Now, how can a woman not be a person? But that was 1916. But she fought the way forward. So please look her up if you can. I think she made historic changes. She withstood all challenges, went right up and lost. You had similar battles being fought in England. You had other battles being fought, like an Odisha lawyer who was Hazra, Sudhanshu Bala Hazra. And finally, you had two things happening. You had Cornelia Sorabji, who became the first woman lawyer sometime in 1921. Sorry? Yeah, she got the BCL from Oxford, but she is a lawyer who first became a practicing lawyer and got a permission from the Allahabad High Court. And that's how it happened, but that was in 1921 roughly. Yes, and 1923 the law was amended finally, Legal Practitioners Act, which allowed people like us to be standing before you and saying, yes, she in the Constitution, think India, and we put the act together. But we have in India today only about 14% women lawyers out of the total of 17 million. So we still have underrepresentation. You have about 10% women judges. It took almost 25 years plus for a woman to make a Supreme Court judge. Fatima Bibi, the Honorable Judge of the Supreme Court, was the first woman judge in the Supreme Court. And you go on with these different figures. So as I said, we are still struggling. And we are looking for the way forward. We need enthusiastic people like you and all of you to put yourselves together. And not only women. We need a consensus among society, amongst women and amongst men, that everybody should be able to have their due. We serve a purpose not only for ourselves when we work or we engage ourselves. We serve a purpose for society. And that economic loss cannot be sustained by any society. That democratic loss cannot be sustained by any society. And in fact, the contributions that we can make in various ways should take the way forward. So with this, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much. It is an honor to be with you people.
We thank you, ma'am, for impressing upon our young minds with your words of wisdom. Now I'd like to introduce the second speaker for the day. I'd like to acquaint you all to Ms. Jyotika Kalra, an advocate at the Supreme Court for over 27 years. Ms. Jyotika Kalra holds a bachelor's degree in commerce and law from Delhi University and a master's degree from Kurukshetra University. In April 2017, she assumed office as a member of the NHRC. A passionate activist, she has been associated with many NGOs, including the All India Women's Conference, the Indian Federation of University Women's Associations, to name a few. She has deliberated upon the rights of women, including issues such as surrogacy, female feticide, and witch hunting, and has also worked towards safeguarding the human rights of domestic workers in Gulf nations and the entry of Dalits into temples. Ms. Kalra has been a driving force behind multiple PILs, including the rights of married women, the non-recruitment of women in the armed forces, and against discriminatory practices in the cinema industry. She has served on the expert committee of the National Commission for Women, the NCW, and was presented with the Outstanding Women Award in 2014. Ms. Kalra has been a member of many internal complaints committees constituted to examine sexual harassment of women at the workplace. In the past, she has enjoyed imparting knowledge as a part-time lecturer at the Faculty of Law, Delhi University, and the IP College at Delhi University. Ma'am, I invite you to the podium.
Thank you, my dear friend Pinky and Pragna. Pinky started by saying that it is not a classroom, but I don't think there could have been a better lecture than this as far as law and constitution and women is concerned. She touched almost entire history of lawmaking, judgments, and with that, modern idea of how the women should be. So, whenever the subject is, the sources are the common and you tend to be uniform in delivery, but I'll try to be a little bit different. So, she started with Vedic period. I also thought that I'll start with Vedic period and all the three religions, which started from, which birthed in India. But now I'm starting with Constituent Assembly to begin with. And it met for the first time in December the 9th, 1946. The strength of the assembly kept fluctuating, but ultimately it had a membership of 299, out of which 15 were the women. To name a few, Vijayalakshmi Pandit, Sarojini Naidu, Sucheta Kriplani, leaders of Indian freedom movement, and other prominent members like Amu Swaminathan, Begum Aziza Rasool, Hansa Mehta, Dekshyani Velayudhan, and Rajkumari Amrit Kaur. Even though the contingent of women in Indian Constituent Assembly was very small, still they made their presence felt. Hansa Mehta, born in Gujarat, a writer, a reformist, and a feminist, said in assembly, and I am quoting this because it holds true even today, and I quote, what we have asked for is social justice, economic justice, and political justice. We have asked for that equality, which can alone be the basis of mutual respect and understanding, and without which real cooperation is not possible between men and women. Women form one half of the population of this country, and therefore men cannot go very far without the cooperation of women. This ancient land cannot attain its rightful place, its honored place in this world without the cooperation of women. And I unquote. Some of these women lived late up to 1990s. And four of them, Vijayalakshmi Pandit, Sarojini Naidu, Rajkumari Amrit Kaur, and Hansa Mehta, have served as the president of All India Women's Conference. The preamble of our constitution promises justice, social, economic, and political equality of status and opportunities. And I'm focusing on Article 253, which confers an obligation upon the Parliament to enact laws to give effect to the international covenants and treaties to which India is a signatory or the participant. I am quoting this because all those judgments which were referred, especially Vishakha, and all those, they are all the logical conclusion of the international covenants. So not only that the India was struggling for equality, but internationally also the gender was an issue. And to begin with, United Nations Charter of 1945 prohibited discrimination on the basis of sex. Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948 ensured equal rights of all human beings. International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights adopted in 1966 guarantees equal protection of law to both the sexes. International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, adopted again in 1966, promises women equality of status. Convention of Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which is popularly called as CEDAW, 1981, provides that all forms of discrimination against women has to be eliminated. It is international covenant. Discrimination against women has to be eliminated, 1981. And finally, the Beijing Conference of 1995, which reaffirms gender equality as a fundamental prerequisite to social justice. Equality, a prerequisite to social justice. India has progressed a lot as far as ensuring equality to women through legislation is concerned. Women-centric laws not only come from Parliament, but the judiciary has also played a praiseworthy role. India's journey of lawmaking began long ago from 1829, abolition of sati, to a legislation. I mean, see the nature of legislation. Abolition of sati, I think everybody understands that, to a legislation of 2005, which protects a woman in the shared household, even from an economic or emotional abuse. I'm talking about Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act. And right up to 2019, when the triple talaq has been criminalized, we are proud to say that India is very progressive as far as lawmaking is concerned. All this should have yielded the desired results, but consider some of the statistics, mainly from the Government of India. The data collected by the Office of the Registrar General of India from Civil Registration System, CRS, in 2016, the states like Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and Rajasthan, the sex ratio at birth, SRB, has declined. I'm not talking about representation in the parliament, I'm saying at the birth, the sex ratio has declined in 2016. And NFHS survey of 2015-16, that is NFHS 4, the sex ratio in many states in India has significantly decreased despite the fact that literacy rates in those states has increased. With the increase in the literacy rate, still the sex ratio has decreased. United Nations Children Fund estimated that up to 5 crore girls and women are missing from the India's population because of termination of the female feticide and high mortality of the girl child. National Family Health Survey, the percentage of women who work has declined from 36% in 2005 and 6 to 24% in 2015-16. Niti Aayog SDG India Index 2018, labor force participation rate of women is 32% of labor force participation rate of men. Women are 1/3 of the men as far as labor force participation is concerned, and women in leadership and politics is almost 8.7% as far as the seats in the state legislative assembly is concerned. SDG of the score of India in SDG 5, gender equality, is 36 out of 100. According to a 2015 study of McKinsey Global Institute, a think tank, women contributes merely 17% of the country's GDP. 17% of the country's GDP, well below the global average of 37%. So forward-looking legislation alone is not the solution. It has to be a multidisciplinary and intersectoral approach which will bring the change. Better health, better education, and I'm focusing on cultural changes. To my mind, the very fundamental thing, that is dowry, we has to accept that there has to be strict no to dowry. Bihar government has launched a campaign to end dowry. So these kinds of campaigns should be launched. Even at Think India, your student must take an oath that we are not going to, the girls that we are not going to take dowry, and the boys also should take an oath that we are going to have a marriage without dowry. And the marriage ceremony should also be shared by both the parties. Why should the girl's family be burdened with the expenses of the marriage? And then I remember late Shrimati Sushma Swaraj ji. Before she died, I think 3 years back, she was addressing a conference in NDMC Center, and she said that my last rites would be performed by my daughter. And when she died, her last rites would be performed by the daughter. So that is a cultural change which I look forward. It's not only late Shrimati Sushma Swaraj. Why anybody and everybody should not take that promise that last rite would be performed by the daughters. And I also go a step forward. If the elder child is a daughter, then that elder child should perform the last rite. That only will give, that inhibition of moksha because of a son will be neutralized. Economic empowerment, as has been said, right in property, etc. And I'll quote Amartya Sen. He made a compelling case, and I quote, that societies need to see women less as passive recipients of help and more as dynamic promoters of social transformers. Women not as a recipient of help, but as a promoter of social transformation. Better opportunities, and in the recent past, I would like to refer to Deepak Karmakar, who was the first one to get the first female gymnast to win a bronze medal in the 2014 Commonwealth Games at Glasgow. And she has also been honored by the Barbie for breaking boundaries to inspire the next generation of girls. So those kinds of girls must come out. Political empowerment, as Pinky had also referred about 73rd and 74th Amendment and reservation in the Panchayati Raj system and the local bodies, you know, that has made an impact. A survey, World Economic Forum's survey on gender gap index in politics, India ranks 15 out of 144 countries. 15 out of 144 countries as far as politics is concerned. Political parties internally have a very high benchmark for women, but all have not actuated them. Shamika Ravi, director of the research Brooking India, she had said that BJP is the best performing and closest 27% of 30% of internal party gender representation. Internal party gender representation, BJP is the closest. And Biju Janata Dal has given 33% tickets, 7 out of 21, to its member of parliaments in Odisha. I think that also needs an applause. And women-centric government policies like liquor prohibition in Bihar, support girl child in education, Ujjwala Yojana for providing LPG gas to household, and last but not the least, the triple talaq indicates that women voter matters to the political parties. And I conclude by quoting Plato when he was talking to his brother Gascon, and I quote, "Then, if women are to have the same duties as men, they must have the same nurture and education." Glaucon said, yes. And finally, I am quoting Vijay Sharma, founder of Paytm, which he said just 2 or 3 days back, and I quote, "As an economy, we won't grow if we treat every woman as a homemaker." And I unquote. Thanks to Think India for having invited me to interact with the students like you. And special thanks to all of you to have heard me patiently. Thank you so much.
I sincerely thank Ms. Kalra for her keen insight and valuable contributions. Now, Now I'll be inviting the next speaker, Ms. Pragna Parande. I'll be giving a brief introduction. A self-motivated and compassionate human being, Srimati Pragna Parande has worked extensively towards the upliftment and empowerment of women and children, with specific emphasis on those hailing from underprivileged and disadvantaged groups. A former lawyer with over 20 years of experience on the Supreme Court of India, she is an incumbent member of the NCPCR and has made continuous efforts towards safeguarding the rights of children. Ms. Parande has been actively involved in multiple non-profit, non-governmental organizations, including Chetna Conscience for Women, Bharatiya Stree Shakti, Seva International, and Seva Kala Shrishti Private Limited. She has contributed immensely to the cause of gender sensitization by organizing workshops, safety talks, and self-defense training sessions for women, and has established several counseling centers which have benefited over hundreds of such families. I now invite upon you, ma'am, to come speak.
नमस्कार। मेरे परिचय में जो 20 साल सुप्रीम कोर्ट ऑफ इंडिया, ये मेरे जो वॉलंटियर्स होते हैं ना, कंसल्टेंट्स, अभी मेरे पास है, उन्होंने लिख दिया है, बट इन दोनों को अच्छी तरह से पता है मैं कितना सुप्रीम कोर्ट जाती थी, कितना सोशल वर्क में थी। यहाँ पर 2 सीनियर सुप्रीम कोर्ट एडवोकेट्स एड्रेस करने के बाद मैं जो कभी कभी वहाँ जाके बाकी सारा समय जो एनजीओज का लिस्ट कुछ दिया है कुछ नहीं दिया है, दिल्ली जैसे शहर में एनजीओ कैसे स्टार्ट करना है, या आप जैसे स्टूडेंट्स जब इंटर्न्स बन के आते हैं तो उनका टाइम वेस्ट ना करते हुए उनको वो जो काम कर सकते हैं उस काम को कनेक्ट करना, यही मेरी कैपेसिटी थी। और बाकी सारे सर्टिफिकेट्स, बाकी सारा एक्सपीरियंस, ये सारा एक साइड है। मेमोराइज करने के बारे में अभी हम डिस्कस कर रहे थे आपके यहाँ आने से पहले। मैं वैसे ही बहुत पुअर हूँ, कुछ याद नहीं रखती हूँ, बट थैंक गॉड लकीली आप लोग बहुत सर्च करके, एआई है, अभी गूगल माता जी है हमारे साथ। मुझे लगता है आज की सेशन का पूरा इंफॉर्मेशन आप लोगों के पास ऑलरेडी है। कितने एमपीस है अगर मैं पूछूंगी तो आपसे तुरंत आ जाएगा, कितना महिला एमपी है अभी पार्लियामेंट में, तुरंत बोलेंगे। 14 में कितने थे वो आप जवाब देंगे। मुझे ऐसे गैदरिंग को एड्रेस करना है जो बहुत अच्छे लॉ स्कूल्स ऑल ओवर कंट्री में पढ़ रहे हैं, और कल से यहाँ पर एक मंथन हो रहा था, चर्निंग प्रोसेस में है। और मेरे पहले 2 स्पीकर्स जिन्होंने पॉलिसी मैटर्स में उनका योगदान था, सुप्रीम कोर्ट में लेडी एडवोकेट्स सर उठा के कॉरिडोर्स में अब घूमते हैं, तो इन दोनों की वजह से घूमते हैं, ये मैं अच्छी तरह से जानती हूँ। दे कॉन्ट्रीब्यूटेड अलॉट। मैंने शायद मेरे डिस्ट्रिक्ट कोर्ट से आके, तेलंगाना निजामाबाद डिस्ट्रिक्ट कोर्ट से आके, जब सुप्रीम कोर्ट में ज्योतिका मैम ने मुझे टेस्ट ले रही थी, जा कोर्ट नंबर सो एंड सो अटेंड कर ले, मुझे याद है आज भी वो दिन, मैं जाके वहां से वो नोट करके उनको शेयर कर रही थी, तो एक जूनियर एडवोकेट का फीलिंग होता है ना मन में, हमने अचीव कर लिया है। जिस कोर्ट में एंटर होना ही अचीवमेंट माना जाता है, आज उस कोर्ट में मैं शबरीमला मैटर में एज ए पिटिशनर चली गई थी चेतना कॉन्शियंस को लेकर। मुझे अभी जो टाइम मुझे दिया गया है उस मैटर में मेरे साथ जिन्होंने एडवोकेट काम किया था, कल मैंने ये मैसेज सर्कुलेट किया क्योंकि टॉपिक हमें कल दिया गया था। उन्होंने 2 पेपर का लिख के भेजे है, उसमें डेफिनेटली उन्होंने ये भी लिखा है इतना इंपॉर्टेंट इश्यूज है तो भी टेम्पल एंट्री के लिए जा रहे हैं, क्योंकि कॉस्ट, जिस कॉस्ट के लिए हम कनेक्ट होते हैं ना, उस कॉस्ट को कहीं ना कहीं वो मेंशन कर देते हैं। तो मैं पढ़ रही थी अभी आके प्रिंट आउट लेके, क्योंकि मैं हार्ड कॉपी से ही कंफर्टेबल हूँ। आप नेक्स्ट 10 मिनट्स कितना आउटडेटेड आंटी टाइप एडवोकेट आपको एड्रेस करने वाली है। एक्चुअली हम इस सेशन को 3 दुर्गाष्टमी के दिन, मैं तो मानूंगी 2 शक्ति स्वरूपिणी और मुझे बीच में बिठाया, हम तीनों क्यों आए? Why we came here to discuss about she in Constitution? यही हमारे परसेप्शंस को बताया जाता है, क्योंकि हमें लगता है महिला ही महिलाओं के बारे में बोल सकते हैं। ऑर्गेनाइजर्स, आई एम सॉरी टू से, आज भी हम वो ही फील करते हैं महिलाओं के बारे में बात करने के लिए, चाहे वो सुप्रीम कोर्ट एडवोकेट है, चाहे वो सॉलिसिटर जनरल है, चाहे एनएचआरसी मेंबर है। दूसरा एनएचआरसी मेंबर क्यों नहीं आए? दूसरे जनरल क्यों नहीं आए? दूसरे एनसीपीसीआर मेंबर क्यों नहीं आए, मेल मेंबर? क्योंकि हम सबको लगता है महिलाओं के बारे में बोलना है तो महिला ही बोल सकती है। तो जब तक ये लगेगा तब तक महिलाओं की रिजर्वेशन होना चाहिए। बिकॉज आई वॉज अगेंस्ट ऑल रिजर्वेशंस। मुझे जो स्पिरिचुअल एंगल बचपन में हम कुछ पढ़ लेते हैं, तो मुझे लगता था मैं बहुत स्पिरिचुअल हूं, तो मैं सोल है, आई एम अगेंस्ट टू एनी रिजर्वेशन। तो बढ़ चढ़ के विद्यार्थी परिषद के दिनों में मैंने एंटी रिजर्वेशन मूवमेंट में भाग लिया। तो लाइफ कैसे हमारे परसेप्शन को बदलती है। बाद में मैंने प्रैक्टिस किया, फिर सोशल प्रैक्टिस क्विट करके सोशल वर्क में ज्वाइन हो गई एज ए फुल टाइमर। वहां जाके मुझे जो रिजर्व कैंडिडेट्स हैं उनकी घरों में, उनकी झुग्गियों में बोलते हैं यहाँ पर, वहाँ मैं रहती थी जाके, मेरा रहना होता था. देन आई रियलाइज दैट मैं 10 साल किसके अगेंस्ट कैंपेन कर रही थी. रियली दे नीड रिजर्वेशंस, बट मेरे अंदर वो जो बैठी हुई है ना पहले से, मुझे लगता था नहीं 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 नहीं, ये तो बंद करना चाहिए. जब 33% रिजर्वेशन का आ रहा था तब भी बहुत बार मुझे लगता था क्यों चाहिए, क्योंकि हम एक सेक्शन से है जहां पर हमें जेंडर डिस्क्रिमिनेशन कभी दिखाया नहीं गया था. मेरी मदर हाईली एजुकेटेड थी, उन्होंने चारों बच्चों को इक्वल काम बांटी थी. और जब मैं लीगल प्रोफेशन में जानना था चाह रही थी तो कोई वकील है ही नहीं, ऐसे प्रोफेशन है, डांट वूंट के एलो तो कर दिया है. उन्होंने सपोर्ट किया, उन्होंने मुझे पढ़ाई करवाती थी. मैं ऐसी स्टूडेंट थी, ग्रेजुएशन और लॉ में भी मदर की हेल्प लेती थी मैं नोट्स लिख के देने के लिए. आप लकी है, आपको सब कुछ मिल जाता है. हमें 30 क्वेश्चंस एट ए ग्लैंस है, इस टाइप में हमें ढूंढना पड़ता था उस टाइम में, मार्केट में मिलते नहीं थे. तो ऐसी हमारी परसेप्शंस बदलते जाते हैं. तो आज जब इस टॉपिक के लिए बुलाया गया, जब आपको शायद पता होगा कोई और स्पीकर आने वाले थे, लास्ट मिनट में 3 एडवोकेट्स को बुलाया. हमारा अटैचमेंट है आप लोगों के साथ, ऑर्गेनाइजर्स के साथ और आप लॉ स्टूडेंट्स के साथ, इसलिए हम पहुंच जाते हैं, हम प्रिपेयर करते हैं. मगर जब प्रिपरेशन से पहले फोन कॉल में मैंने पूछा क्या हम 370 के बारे में बोलने लायक नहीं है, क्या हम नेशनल सिक्योरिटी के बारे में प्रिपेयर होके नहीं आ सकते? क्या हमने लड़ाई नहीं लड़ा? क्या इस देश को डिफेंस मिनिस्टर नहीं थी? एक डिफेंस मिनिस्टर दे के अगर आप ब्लैंकेट ऐसे डाल सकते हैं, महिला एम्पावर्ड है, पॉलिसी मेकर्स बन चुके हैं, नो वे, कहीं नहीं है. एक हफ्ता पहले निर्मला सीतारमण खुद बोल रही थी महिलाओं को आगे आना चाहिए. आप आगे आओ, आउट ऑफ बॉक्स सोचो, अपने कंफर्ट जोन से बाहर निकलो. एक कैबिनेट मिनिस्टर की दर्द दिख रहा था, हम दोनों पार्टिसिपेट कर रहे थे वहां पर, क्योंकि बहुत सारे चीजें अनजाने में हम लोग मान के बैठे हैं ऑल आर इक्वल. इक्वालिटी, मैं तो दहेज के अगेंस्ट हूं बट प्रॉपर्टी राइट्स के फेवर में हूं. डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस एक्ट जब मिसयूज किया जाता है तो हर कोई शोर मचाते हैं, हंसते हैं, पार्लियामेंट में हंसते हैं. महिलाओं के विषय आते ही हंसी शुरू हो जाती है. घरों में डिसीजन मेकिंग के बारे में कौन सी महिला 3 जनरेशन पहले शायद दादी नानी का ज्यादा सुनते थे, आज मम्मा चिल्लाती रहती है, सुनने वाला नहीं रहता है. कुछ फैमिलीज में मदर डोमिनेटिव रहती है, वो अलग है. बट ओवरऑल कितने परसेंटेज घरों में डिसीजन मेकिंग में महिलाओं का योगदान होता है? प्रॉपर्टी परचेज करने में होता है क्या? बाइक खरीदने में होता है क्या? कहीं ना कहीं डिसीजन मेकिंग ग्रास रूट लेवल से लेकर हाईएस्ट पॉलिसी मेकर्स तक कहीं ना कहीं महिलाओं के इश्यूज महिलाओं ही रखना पड़ेगा और कुछ सालों तक. इसलिए आज हम तीनों आ गए. सो एक्सेप्ट इट. इसलिए 33% रिजर्वेशन होना चाहिए. एंड इट शुड नॉट स्टॉप ओनली 33%. ये भी फिर ब्रेन गेम हो जाती है. 33 हो गए ना, काफी है, बट पंचायत राज में प्रूव हो रहा है, उसके लिए भी बोल देते हैं. जैसे डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस एक्ट का है, नहीं तो कोई वुमेन रिलेटेड एक्ट्स है. अभी मैम भी बोल रही थी जुवेनाइल जस्टिस को बदल दिया है बहुत कुछ. मिसयूज होती है तो हर एक्ट मिसयूज हो रहा है. मर्डर करके भी मिसयूज करते हैं. लॉ को तोड़ मोड़ कौन नहीं करता? सिर्फ और सिर्फ महिला रिलेटेड कुछ भी चेंजेस आते हैं तो तुरंत शुरू हो जाती है मिसयूज हो रहा है, मूवीज निकल आते हैं. एंड वी विल एंजॉय. हमें हंसी आती है. हमारे समाज में जो डिग्रेडेशन हो रही है उसको देखकर वी विल एंजॉय. इवन हमारे कॉलेजेस में भी, मेट्रो में मेरे साथ बच्चे चल रहे थे, वो भी क्यों लेडीज को क्यों अलग से होना चाहिए, देखो कितने धक्के खा रहे हैं सब अंकल लोग. मैं मानती हूं परसेप्शंस बदल रहे हैं। पहले हीरो रोते नहीं थे, अब बॉलीवुड मूवीज में हीरोज को इतना रुलाते हैं। तो हमें कुछ दिखाया जाता है तो हम मान लेते हैं, बोल्ड लड़कियां दिखाया जा रहा है, हम मानते हैं बोल्ड है। जाके देखिए दिल्ली की जे क्लस्टर्स में, स्लम्स में, जिनको यूनिवर्सिटीज में एडमिशन नहीं मिलता, उन लड़कियों का सेल्फ कॉन्फिडेंस उधर कॉर्नर में, वायनाड जाओ, केरल तो चलो केरल बहुत लिटरेट है, उत्तराखंड में जाओ, एक छोटी सी गांव में जाओ, दे आर मोर कॉन्फिडेंट देन मेट्रोस का हमारी टीनेजर्स, नॉट ओनली गर्ल्स। बट उनका प्रॉब्लम्स अलग है। दिखता ऐसे है दिल्ली की लड़कियां सारे इतना स्मार्ट है, नहीं भाई, वो डिप्राइव्ड है। किसी की ओरेटरी सुन लेते हैं, पार्लियामेंट में बोल रहे हैं, दे कैन हैंडल एवरीथिंग। एक बार मैंने अटेंड किया है, स्पीकर सुमित्रा महाजन जी, सारे पार्लियामेंटेरियंस, महिला एंड लेजिस्लेटर्स, पूरा ऑल ओवर कंट्री बुलाई। वहां पर यह बताया जाता है हर स्टेट में भी महिला और बाल आयोग मंत्रालय या स्वास्थ्य मंत्रालय आज भी वही चल रहा है, वो महिलाओं को दिया जाता है। पार्लियामेंट में इतने सारे कमिटीज है, मैम आप दोनों भी बहुत, कहीं पर भी महिला नहीं रहती। आज मैं ओपन आप सबके सामने चैलेंज करती हूं, आज भी अगर मुझे मौका मिलता है तो जिस अमित शाह जी की जगह हम तीनों उनको पूरक बने हैं, उनके साथ काम करने के लिए मैं तैयार हूं। आई एम रेडी टू वर्क विथ हिम। बट पार्लियामेंट में जाना पड़ेगा ना मेरे पास पार्टी फंड नहीं है, ना दो टाइप की कमाई नहीं है, ना कॉन्टेक्स्ट नहीं है। और ह्यूमिलिएशन जो होता है पार्लियामेंटेरियंस को, जो एमपी इलेक्ट होके आते हैं, जो लैंग्वेज यूज किया जाता है बाकी मेंबर ऑफ पार्लियामेंट से या बाकी पार्टीज की, जो यहां से उसका खंडन भी नहीं होता। क्या लैंग्वेज यूज किया गया रिसेंटली, आप सब जानते होंगे। जो बीजेपी में जीत के आते हैं वो क्या है, सबसे वर्स्ट बैकग्राउंड जिनको रहता है वो सेक्शन को काउंटर करने में हिम्मत नहीं होती है। और जो मेहनत करके आते हैं उनकी पब्लिक लाइफ में उनका इतना गंदी तरीके से चरित्रहीन बोलने के बाद कौन सी महिला को आगे आने की मन करता है। सो स्ट्रैटेजी, नथिंग बट इट्स स्ट्रैटेजी। क्यों 20 साल से 33% रिजर्वेशन लोकसभा में नहीं हो रही है, क्यों 108 अमेंडमेंट आज तक नहीं आती है, बीजेपी गवर्नमेंट 5 साल रहने के बाद क्यों नहीं आया। हाउडी मोदी, clap your hands. Nobody will question that. अभी मैं बोल रही थी ज्योतिका मैम, कुछ show some gratitude towards the people, persons, or women who work for your nation. Sushma Swaraj ji, I am happy my friend Jyotika ji remembered her. Thank you. मैंने कुछ ये सब साइड रख के अंदर से हमें सोचना चाहिए, जो वुमेन लीडर्स आपके सामने जिए मरे हैं उनको याद रखें। उनका पॉलिटिकल करियर में कभी उनको किसी ने बात नहीं बोल पाए, मगर सबकी लाइफ ऐसे नहीं होती है। सब एडवोकेट नहीं होते हैं, सब मेट्रोस में पले बड़े नहीं होते हैं, रूरल बैकग्राउंड से आते हैं। आप बच्चों में जो रूरल बैकग्राउंड से आते हैं उनको सिटी लाइफ को समझने में ही तो एक जन्म निकल जाती है। सो पॉलिटिशियंस एंड पॉलिटिक्स एंड मनी मैटर्स कैसे महिलाएं हैंडल करके आगे आएंगे। 50% तो दूर की बात है, मेल मेंबर्स को हर पार्टी ने अपोज किया है। आप यूट्यूब में जस्ट आप इंटरनेट पे जाइए, क्लिक करके देखिए क्या क्या नाटक हुआ है पार्लियामेंट में। सो नीड है, शी इन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन ही नहीं, शी पार्लियामेंट में भी रहना चाहिए, घरों में रहना चाहिए। आज के बाद हम सब अपने आप को रेस्पेक्ट दे और आसपास में जो कोई पॉलिटिक्स एंटर करना चाह रहा है, जुडिशियल सर्विसेज में जाना चाह रहे हैं, उन सबको भी हम एंकरेज करें। और जैसे गिलहरी की योगदान होती है वैसे हम सब भी इस बड़ा जो अभियान है आपने जो लिया है थिंक टैंक, और आप सबको शुभकामनाएं। धन्यवाद।
Thank you so much, ma'am.
I must tell, I told Bharatji that on this panel there should be a male speaker. You ask him. women issue is not to be addressed by the women alone. I mean, that's the real, I